due to a lot of infiltration into the system, as well as new regulations, in the late 90s, a new plant was envisioned, designed, and ultimately constructed on the other side of Piney Creek from the first plant. The decision was made to build the new plant as opposed to upgrade the previous plant. For one reason was because of the limited capacity to deal with those high wet weather flows that came in when stormwater enters the sewer system, which is not the intent, not the desire, but it was the reality. So the decision was made at the time to deal with the flow and construct a larger plant to meet both the higher flow as well as the tighter limits for treatment that were being imposed. So that plant has a 5 million gallon per day average with an average daily flow of 1.1 MGD. As far as nutrient removal, we're pretty much looking at nitrogen and phosphorus. So that had that was designed to treat to a limit of 8 milligrams per liter of nitrogen and 2 milligrams per liter for total phosphorus. That plant worked well for a number of years, and then through the Bay Restoration Program, the need developed through MDE and the state to bring that plant to tighter nutrient limits, particularly the nitrogen and phosphorus. So that whole process started around 2008 with the signing of an ENR grant agreement, which essentially was the city saying, yes, Maryland, we will take your grant money, and with that, we will upgrade the plant to meet new lower limits to improve the quality of the water getting to Chesapeake Bay. The next couple items there are the process through the study phase, looking at technologies. There was a pilot study for the selected alternative. Ultimately, the city entered into a consent agreement with the state to design and upgrade the system. One quick side note, in 2012 was also when the York Street pump station, which is, as you're coming into town on 194 on your right, that facility, which was original to the 1950s system, was upgraded. And the reason I bring that up is that really was when all the flow at that point that was getting to that station, even in storm events, actually made it to the plant. So there was a big increase of flow seen at the plant because of that upgrade, which was able to then pump the flows that got to it, and in all cases year round. Design of the upgrade was in 13 and 14. It was built in 15 and 16. And in 2017, the new permit limits for 4 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen and 0.3 milligrams per liter of total phosphorus became effective. So you can see the nitrogen limit was cut in half from 8 to 4, and the phosphorus limit was drastically cut from 2 all the way down to 0.3. Those are both approaching like limit of technology levels. Those are very low levels to be treated to as all part of the Bay Restoration Program. So that's the history of wastewater treatment in Taneytown over the last 60 years in 5 minutes. Any questions before I move on?
Just a quick question about the old York Street pumping station. When that did overflow, did that just overflow directly into Piney Creek?
That's right.
Okay. So essentially it was untreated. Our peak numbers weren't, we had no idea what the peak numbers were because we didn't know what the flow was because it was going directly out.
So looking a little bit more with the current compliance environment, as I said, the current plant was upgraded with the consent agreement. As part of that, there were new limits that were established, and they were floating annual load limits, and I'll go into in the next slide a little bit more detail about what that means. But the key points being that they're floating, it's an annual limit, and it's load-based. A lot of these issues stem from wet weather issues. So it's It's high flows that are getting into the collection system, the sewer collection system, and making their way to the treatment plant lead to the majority of the issues that are often facing the plant and some of the compliance things that have been noted. So the right side of this slide covers more of that infiltration and inflow. So I was referred to as, where infiltration is generally the groundwater making its way into the sewer pipes, and inflow being a more direct connection. So picture like a downspout connected to a sanitary sewer or something like that. Both of them not desirable for a separate sanitary system like you have in the city here. So this looking more now at the collection system upstream of the plant, there's terracotta pipes, clay pipes, and PVC. Generally, it's the terracotta pipes that are the source of the issues, the older portions of town, the older portions of the system. So this is a long-term issue that's been facing the city. We have records in our office going back to the 80s of the city actively trying to remove wet weather flows from the city's sewer system. And again, I'll remind you that decision that was made in the late 90s to kind of deal with the flow at the plant by building a bigger plant on the other side of the stream, as opposed to trying to more aggressively attack the flows in the I&I getting into the system. Just to put things into perspective a little bit, there's some flows from 2022 that are listed there. So on a minimum month average, it's about 0.53 million gallons per day, which is roughly in line with the amount of water, drinking water, that's produced on an average basis. Average day flow is all the way up to 0.83 MGD, so that accounts for all that I&I that gets into the system. The plant is permitted for 1.1 million gallons a day on an annual basis. And there was a max day event in May of last year of 5.2. So you can see how it goes almost a tenfold increase from that minimum flow, minimum month flow of 0.53 all the way up to a peak day flow of 5.2. So it just shows you all that wet weather influence at the plant, which has an effect on how the plant can treat. There's a lot of numbers on this particular slide here, but just I'll try to keep it simple. From a load perspective, if you think about the pounds of nitrogen or the pounds of phosphorus, that essentially is the flow through the plant times the concentration of how many pounds per volume you have. That's how you get a load, and the load is how the state regulates how much nitrogen and phosphorus the city can discharge from their plant. So it's essentially and the load limit, if you were to take that annual load limit and slice it into 365 days, it accounts for 37, I have my units wrong there, 37 pounds of nitrogen a day, and 2.8 pounds of phosphorus a day that the plant could have in its effluent and still meet that load limit. For example, on a very high flow day, which is my May 9th, 2022 example, you can see the nitrogen 3.9. Okay, that's a good concentration. Phosphorus 0.2. Okay, we're under. The problem is the flow side, 2.1 MGD. That was right after 3 days of rain. That was that peak event that I shared in the previous slide. So the result is, over twice what is allocated for that day or about twice for nitrogen, and more than what's allocated for the day for phosphorus. So it's even when the plant is meeting its concentration limit, these high flows cause compliance issues. And contrast that with a low flow day, which is the May 24th, 2023 example. With a low flow and concentrations that are right in the same neighborhood, we're at a fraction of what the plant could discharge on a given day. So that flow piece is a really important component to consider. Backing up a little bit about the floating load cap, the way that works is that the state allocates a certain pounds per year that the plant is allowed to discharge, but they base that on a flow value. So it's if you discharge 1.1, which is your capacity, that's your number for load. If you discharge half of that, your load capacity gets cut in half. So you can't use a low flow to kind of offset a high concentration. You really are stuck with that concentration and flow. Both are important components. The figures on the right, the one on top is the average flow at the plant over the years. So one thing to point out there, if you look, number one, there's a lot of peaks, right? Those are wet years versus dry years. And the second thing to note is it's been gradually increasing, which makes sense. Over the last 23 years, there's been quite a bit of development in town. But if you look at the bottom figure, that's per capita flow to the plant. So what you're seeing there is you're seeing the efforts of the city trying to contain I&I. So per capita, the flow is going down from about 160 gallons per person per day down to 125 over that same period. So the city is making progress in removing the I&I. It's just it's a major problem, and it's a complicated thing to identify and to fix. Looking at the violations that have been mentioned in this to the council previously, that are currently in discussion. We're currently in discussions with MD about. They really fall. You can see them there in the table, but they really kind of fall under a couple of different categories. One would be those nitrogen and phosphorus load limits that I've mentioned. Those annual load limits that the city has exceeded in the majority of the past several years since the recent upgrade. The other one would be more daily or monthly. There's also those limits as well that have been exceeded on some occasions. And then there's also what I call other, which are just small upsets within the plant that may not have been overly criticized if it weren't in an environment of a number of other violations. So when they kind of pile up, the state tends to look at all of them as opposed to ones that maybe in other times the city would say, oh, this is what happened, and the state would be okay with it. They kind of tend to pile them all up when they accumulate to this degree. So the latest settlement offer from the state, as you're probably aware, is a $75,000 penalty, and that would cover all of the fines that are listed on this screen, plus the annual load exceedances for last year, 2022. Our most recent correspondence to the state was to try to make the case that money spent towards continuing to remove I&I, that would be a better use of city funds as opposed to paying this penalty. So we estimated that for every $3.96, based on recent history of I&I removal projects, we could remove a gallon per day from the system. So we could remove about 19,000 gallons per day with that funds, as opposed to writing a check to MDE. This is a timeline of recent correspondence with MDE about compliance issues. So the top couple items are previous compliance matters that have been settled. The one on the top, 27,000, was related to essentially delays in completion of the ENR upgrade and subsequent violation of the interim standards that was part of the consent agreement. The next one were some small sanitary sewer overflows. And then the rest of the dates listed there, you kind of see our back and forth process, working with the state to try to work this out. We have been, aware of these violations and these situations, and staff and working with myself and other folks at CDM Smith have developed an action list and plans to address these items at the plant and in the collection system. And we've been working with MDE throughout the process to keep them informed of how we were going through that process. You can see I guess the other thing to take away here is it's a long process. Things are measured in years, not necessarily weeks. They first kind of reached out with, MDE first reached out with major concerns and mentioning the violations back in August of 2021. And here we are still kind of talking about the same issue. Not to say that nothing's been happening. Like I said, we've been working through this and we've been developing plans, and I think we've been making improvements. And I&I has been coming down and performance of the plant has been increasing, which I think only helps to make the case to the state that, the penalty fees would be better spent continuing these efforts. Next slide kind of highlights what those efforts have been, and goes through the violations, what was the cause, and then how has the city responded. So I guess I'll start on the right side there on the box. We've been having routine meetings with the staff, Kevin, Jim, sometimes the operations staff at the plant, to talk about all these, develop plans, check in on where we stand on the plans. We've been providing routine updates to council. We've worked on the Carroll County Water and Sewer Master Plan and incorporated components of these projects and these efforts into the master plan. And we've also completed wastewater capacity management plans and submitted those to the state. The issues you could look at, at the I&I flows to the plant, all that wet weather, storm water getting into your sewer collection system, the capital improvement program that you adopted, I believe that was last year, or
We've had one for 2 years now.
2 years,
so,
okay.
yeah.
They include a number of projects that are designed to reduce I&I. And in just so far with the sewer rehab program, there's been a little over 2,600 feet of sewer replaced, over 4,000 feet of sewer that's lined, and about $1 million spent on those projects so far. We looked at analyzers at the plant to more closely track the nutrients. The plant staff and the Public Works Department has made an effort to purchase more spares, to be more resilient when issues come up and to be able to respond to problems. One of those major problems was the ferric chloride system, which is what's used to treat for the phosphorus. That whole system has essentially been replaced. They've partnered with the chlorine, the disinfection manufacturer, to have a maintenance program that the manufacturer oversees and implements to make sure that they don't have violations with the disinfection side of things. And we've completed an asset management and redundancy evaluation, and that also is what led to a lot of those shelf spares that have been purchased. So when a piece of equipment goes down, a valve fails, the plant staff is more able to respond in a quick fashion to get things back and up and running as soon as possible. So, those upsets still happen, but the city can be more responsive to them. This is all these projects here are part of the capital improvement program from a perspective of the I&I reduction. So we went through and did a flow study and televised all of the terracotta pipe in the system. The public works staff went out and inspected all the manholes, and out of that came a plan to line all of the remaining terracotta in the system, line or replace the remaining terracotta. So based on geography and a budget analysis and an efficiency, we broke those areas into a bunch of different projects, and they've been planned. We had some this year, those are the ones in yellow, that have all recently been completed. You can see the FY 2024 projects listed there along West Baltimore Street and in Memorial Park, and have plans to do the last remaining areas, the Cloverberry neighborhood and what we termed as Old Town. So, you know, the portion of the city where we're sitting right now, in upcoming years. So at the end of that process, all of the terracotta pipe within the city will be lined. So at that point, it will all be either terracotta or PVC, which has much less I&I than the terracotta that you have out there now. And I know, looking at the numbers and also talking with the treatment plant staff, you know, when these projects are completed, particularly like the Meadowbrook project that was completed earlier this year, they can see drastic and immediate improvement at the York Street pump station where flows went down considerably. These, I believe you've been seeing. These are the charts that show the monthly tracking of the total nitrogen and total phosphorus in the effluent at the plant. So this is, these two figures show nitrogen on the left and phosphorus on the right from last year. So you can see the limit in red and the actual in orange. Couple things to note. The city was under for nitrogen last year. You can also note how the red line is not straight, and that's to do with the floating aspect of it. It changes with the flow each month. So it does make it kind of tricky for operations staff to know exactly what their target is going to be at the end of the year, because it's not a straight line. The right side is phosphorus. You can see from last year we were on a good start, and then that's when they had the issues with the ferric chloride feed pumps, which I mentioned earlier have been totally replaced, which caused the plant to not meet the phosphorus annual load limit last year. Then looking at this year, again, nitrogen's on the left and phosphorus is on the right. The plant continues to perform well with respect to nitrogen. You can see we're under the load limit and projected to stay under the load limit. Phosphorus is on the right. You could see things were going very well until June of this year. There were some upsets with the system, most notably with the reduction of I&I in the system. What happened is when we kind of stepped back and looked at the numbers, the plant had been dosing ferric chloride, which again is the chemical to reduce phosphorus, at a rate consistent with a more dilute wastewater. But because of all the I&I efforts, it's reducing the overall flow, which increases the concentration. So that was one of the contributing factors that led to the spike. That's been addressed. The ferric chloride feed rate's been increased, and performance as of like the last several weeks has improved. But you can see once again there was an upset. On the top there you can see a note. We're projecting at if the limits, or if the concentration is about 0.23 milligrams per liter for the rest of the year, that line can come back down, be below the load limit, and the plant would be back in compliance for 2023. So it's still very achievable with those new feed rates for the chemical. The last thing I wanted to add is just on that, as far as that chemical goes, it's, it's an operator decision on how much the feed rate is. You can remove some phosphorus by adding some ferric chloride. You can, up to a point, remove more by adding more. And obviously the chemical costs money. So that is an act in balancing clearly the need to remain compliant, but also not being wasteful with the city's resources. So the plant staff is using much more of that chemical than they historically have to drive compliance. That's been the latest priority for obvious reasons. So I was talking a lot. Kevin, anything to add?
With the chemical addition, when we had the I&I issue, we were buying one load. Our ferric chloride containment tank is 3,000 gallons. That's the minimum we can purchase. So you have to pretty much run the tank and make the right decision of when to buy that as that tank's running out, you can receive the full load. Because they show up with 3,000 gallons, they offload all 3,000. There's no other place to put it. You don't want to put it into the tanks, any excess, because that will drive your pH down, which is also, would end up being a violation of our permit. So it is specific that we try to time that right. But we were buying one tank every 3 months. At the rate we are going now, we're going to be probably buying one tank every month. And that is at a clip of about $16,000 a truck. So we are doing everything we can to get these numbers down. I mean, we've purchased test kits to actually test the phosphorus levels coming in. The other day when we were at our low flow, dry weather, it was 24 milligrams per liter coming in, and we got to get it down to a 0.3. 2 days after a rain event, it was 14 milligrams per liter because of the rain coming in and the flow, it's thinning out. So it is a tricky situation to try to handle, but we've done some testing on the pumps. We've got stuff set and we've seen the numbers dropping down. I'm hoping to maintain that 0.23 or try to drive it even lower to get that chart to cross back over. But it comes with a cost with chemical. We weren't considering buying that much chemical this year, so more than likely our budget for our materials and supplies is going to be hit with a, I guess, change in budget, asking for more money at some point in time. And that's, anybody have any questions on this stuff?
A couple of quick questions, Kevin. Start with the ferric chloride tank. Is there, how much would it cost to get to a bigger tank, and would that help? Would we be able to reduce our cost by buying bigger loads?
I mean, a larger tank would help, but then again, I mean, you still have to, I mean, we would still be buying to fill that tank. So if I'd have a 5,000 gallon tank, I know I can, when I'm 2,000 gallons left or 1,000 gallons left, I can not have to worry about, I'm going to run out, or I order it and they tell me it's going to be here at a certain time. And next thing I know, I have 2 days or 3 days where I'm out of chemical because the supplier is behind and can't get to me. So a larger tank would help.
Yeah, any idea how much that would cost if you looked into that?
That is something I'd have to have a conversation with Brian, but we've not, I mean, space is now another consideration to where can we put that? So,
And just,
I mean, we're looking at alternatives of how to, with the loads we're getting in, that we can, if we don't run it completely empty, if we have a secondary containment and we can offload into other storage units that we can have to keep ourselves without building another tank. So we are looking at other options to be able to order and not have to wait till
You're dead
breaking
out to
point
get
that
it
we're
going,
almost
right.
out.
Okay. The problems with the feed pump last year, that was most of the second half of last year? Is that, as I understood the graph?
It came in around October. The feed pumps, we were bandaging these, and these were pumps that were installed in 2000.
Right, you and I had this conversation once.
So, I mean, we were working on getting all that, and it got to a point where the repairing of these pumps were not worth, we were just spending money left. Every time we'd fix something, something else would break. So it was literally, okay, it's time to upgrade, replace these pumps with brand new everything. So from the pumps coming out of the tank, all the way to the piping going into the tank, into the SBRs, our treatment tanks, everything was replaced. And then some of that at the end of the year where it started to level off, that was where we were fine tuning that system and getting it up. But again, we were basing it on I&I flows. So we set our doses, and we were actually, we'll come to find out now that we're getting rid of I&I, we were underdosing.
Right.
So that's where some of that stuff is, where we run out and then having to switch these stuff, so. But we've went in the past 3 weeks, I think we've changed from dosing our ferric at 1, for every 1,000 gallons, we'd add 1 second, the pump would run for 1 second. So, and the flows, dosing of this ferric is based on influent flows. So the influent flow meter running, and when that's running, that tells us, and then the computer automatically calculates. But we had it set for 1 second per 1,000 gallons. We are now at 3.3 seconds per 1,000 gallons in 3 weeks. So we have slowly been stepping it up. I mean, we didn't want to throw a high number at it and go way off and then work our way back. We're trying to
Good plan.
strategically step it up, that we don't just waste.
No,
And
good.
speaking of the influent flow meter, this past Wednesday, was out there with with a contractor to get the blacktop done for where we had the pipe issues. While I was out there, we had a lightning strike nearby. That flow meter went down Wednesday. Good thing is, a couple years ago, we had it replaced. And when we had it replaced, because we had issues where it was a electrical surge took it out. We actually put a piece of equipment in between at the flow meter, that if there was a surge come through, a lightning strike or anything, that is what takes the hit. That took the hit. We had it back up and running Friday morning. So needless to say, we are working to get that spare on the shelf, that we can be ready to, again, for the next one. But anything like that, a little hiccup like that, but we can manually dose, but that is just throwing darts blindly at a wall. So once we get this number set, I think we will be well on track to meet permit. It's just finding that right number.
Chris, are you done?
Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. As we're continuing to take care of the I&I, then, are we to expect, as that concentration level rises, are we going to need to dose it more? I mean, is this going to be a continuing issue as the water gets?
More concentrated?
More concentrated,
It could be, yes. It could be. I mean, but we'd have to see, I mean, that's where testing of the influent, if it maintains at a level and we know what we need to dose at for
Right.
that level, we should be able to, we might not have to, but
We might need more.
When Kevin was telling me this the other day, there are systems that you can put in the influent side to monitor the concentration
Well, and that
coming
kind
in.
of goes
It's not
along
just a
with
grab.
the second part would be, is there any additional processes that we can add to the system in order to make that?
there is, and they are inline analyzers, which come with not only just the upfront cost to put them in, but daily operational, because as that is a wet-based chemistry, there is maintenance, there's chemicals to buy to keep everything clean and running.
Right.
So again, anything we put at it is coming at a cost. But yes, we are looking at doing something other than just grab samples and testing, but with what we have now and what is there, we are testing 2 to 3 times a week, just getting spot checks to see where we are, low level, level,
Right.
wet weather, trying to get a nice range that we know, hey, during this type of event, when our flow's here, we know where we need to set pumps at.
What about additional processes that also would do or would assist in cleaning or changing the numbers? Not just reading it, but like is adding, that chemical the only option for adjusting those phosphorus levels? Or are there other systems that can be used in addition?
There are other chemicals that are similar, like they behave in a similar way. They coagulate the phosphorus and make it so that it drops out, essentially is what you're doing. One of the things I mentioned, like that we have this task list that we've been going down through. One of the lower items on that list that we haven't gotten to yet is chemical testing of different chemicals, as well as dose response testing. So looking, if you double the dose, does it improve your performance by 2, or does it, where's that kind of break point where it's no longer efficient to
Right.
keep? So that is,
And
with
can
this
those
light,
chemicals
with
be
this
used in
more
conjunction with each other, or are they a total separate?
Separate.
Okay.
separate, but with this recent uptick here over the last 6 weeks, that's kind of brought that back to the forefront.
Has that been kind of in time with the sewer improvements on Broad Street? Is that kind of been the trigger on this?
So the sewer improvements on Broad Street were part of this figure, so that was something that we were, has been a known issue. And it was part of the
It
old
seems like the
town,
numbers have
but-
taken a jump in the last 6 or 8 weeks since they finished the sewer.
Oh, an issue, I'm sorry, I
the-
wasn't following what you're saying.
The Fairground Avenue and
And that
elementary
also
school.
finished about the same time. So
Yes.
all of that
Yes.
stuff is
Yes.
kind of converging on you as you,
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you can correlate those two together, that removing all that I&I, because around the backside of the elementary school, a 10-inch main, they had a pump bypassing, and as they were digging to a manhole that should not have any flow coming out of it, a 10-inch main was flowing half full of clear groundwater, and that was going to the plant.
That was the big, of the
Right.
2023 projects, that was the
That
most
right there was
impactful.
an extreme amount of water. And talking with Randy today, up around at Broad Street and Roberts Mill Road, right by the manhole there where they were had to close down over the
Yeah.
weekend. There's a little bit of I&I coming in there that they're about ready to get. He said there was a small pipe that was running about half full that he informed me of this morning when I talked to him a little bit.
now, is that a pipe that's supposed to be replaced in the project, or is that something else that we need to look at down the line?
Part of that is being replaced back to the, because I think that was one of the service laterals coming into that manhole. So we'll get at least back to the property line and see where, hopefully it's out on our side, not on theirs.
Yeah, hopefully it's not somebody's got tied something in.
In the older sections of town, a lot of older houses have floor drains. The downspouts are tied in. It is not a
Optimal.
practice that happens now, but it's something that happened in the past. And unless we go in and inspect meters and stuff, we do have an ordinance that speaks to that, but we don't go in and just, we don't enforce it unless we see it. We educate when we're in there doing water meter checks.
Right.
So it's not a hammer down everybody has to close everything up.
That's problem with most of this stuff. It's underground and you can't see it till you dig it up.
Yes.
Good.
Additional comments, questions, or concerns? Was that the end of the presentation? Just
It was.
I have something. Can you go to slide 6?
I can, although I just,
No. Yeah, I just should have asked that 30 seconds ago.
yeah, no, I think,
Yeah,
there we
there we
go.
go.
He's got it.
One of the things that I wanted to give, you see where it starts at October 2020, and it says interim standard settlement, 27,000. So we don't have the history prior to that for your information. But you may ask yourself, well, why do we think we can negotiate at all with MDE? I mean, they say this is the fine, and we're trying to come up with reasons. But if we gave you, what is it, 19, 18, 17, maybe even 16, you could see that we were being assessed a penalty all those years as well. And those were for not meeting the interim standards, meaning the standards they set while we were constructing the ENR upgrade. So they knew when we started we weren't going to make the permit, but they said, hey, we'll set these interim standards during the construction period, and if you don't meet those, the fines are less. And the fine that they fined us, you see the settlement at $27,000 and you say, yeah, that's not too bad. What they started out was 80, 70, I mean, it was a huge number. That when we looked at it, part of it was calculated in error, meaning that they had violations that we were not really violating of. Part of it was a delay in the number of days that it took us to complete the plant, but some of those delays were accountable to MDE for not paying the bills so that we can make things happen. So you see that when we say 27,000, it started at a big, big number. And when we negotiated with them, it came down to 27. So that's why we have this theory that we can go talk to them about saying, hey, we want to negotiate with you. They want to be able to show that we paid a fine because we violated the rule. But there is lots of wiggle room, and has happened in the past. So we may want to get that data just so we have it to show that, you know, you've helped us out before when there was an issue. We always make the same argument. We'd rather put the money back into the plant. But I think that's important for that slide.
Does that argument get much traction with them?
I think it came down from whatever, 75 to 27. So some of that was mathematical, but I've never had a client that got out of paying. The shorthand is they're enforcing the clean water standards of EPA. So they have to have some boxes checked to show that they have, when they find violators, yes, EPA, we are taking care of that. But they have a lot of latitude. If you want to back up and look at the whole situation with fines, you know, that's why they have me involved. This is a settlement. That's what it's a settlement of like a lawsuit. They are going to bring a suit against us for violations where they have to prove we violated, which is pretty easy. And we can defend ourselves in court to show them whatever reason. But instead of doing that, we can reach a settlement agreement that says, well, we'll just pay you and agree to this, this, and this. So think about it like when you get a speeding ticket, I'm sure you've never gotten any, you can send your fine in and you don't have to go to court. That's what we're doing here. That kind of puts it in perspective.
Jim, did you have anything to add?
Brian touched on this with one of the slides where we talked about the floating cap, just to kind of emphasize that even if the plant meets the daily limits with the volume of flows that we've historically seen, we're still not going to meet permit because of that floating cap and the total number of pounds per year. That's why the emphasis has been on these I&I projects through the capital improvement program. So that's been what we determined to be the biggest bang for our buck to try to regain compliance.
From the start to finish, how long would you say that the process has been from where we identified where the issues really were on the I&I to completed projects, or to where we are at least today?
I guess the flow study was being done while we were working on the first capital improvement program that the previous council approved for, trying to remember if it was like at the tail end of FY22. But the flow study was I think had just finished at that point. So and that really just kind of supported what the gut feeling was as to where the problem areas were, you know, areas that were close to streams like the elementary school, and, you know, the flow study kind of supported those hunches. So, I mean, I think within a year to 2 years we've had, and we still have like the projects in the CIP that are not completed yet, we still need to do engineering for those, as well as then construction. So I'd say, you know, between having the budget approved for the project and executing it. A little over a year for the current round of I&I projects for the last fiscal year.
What I'm driving at is, were these things in the works before they decided to lay $75,000 settlement on us?
Yes.
Or, did this come after us because we didn't do anything? If we can say that, hey, this stuff was all in the works, and it just takes a while for these things to happen. So, you're assessing us for things that happened while we were making the improvements. And I'm not sure how much that timeline overlaps.
Yes, we were working on the capital improvement program before 2020. So I know I was appointed as city manager in 2020, but I was still doing planning and zoning until summer of 21 when we hired Daryl. But I know as acting city manager, I was working on the capital improvement program to try to drive these numbers down. At that point, it wasn't being perceived as much as a compliance issue as a way to build capacity so that we would have adequate capacity for development projects and commercial industrial development, that we wanted to still entertain.
Right.
Fortunately, we were already working on it when we got, the first of those letters from MDE about the offer to settle and so on.
I would just add to that, I think the four of us first met, it was in 2020, with the goal of creating a plan on how we were going to attack it. And I think what started off as the agenda for that first meeting and sort of tracking ended up becoming the tool and the report, I guess I would say, that we handed over to MDE to say, this is how we're approaching it. So I think it was sometime in 2020. I could look up the month, but it's about when. And I guess the last comment I just wanted to add was on the floating cap. The one piece we haven't talked about yet is the cap word in that phrase. And the reason I bring that up is so if so your limit is based on your flow, but up until you get to that 1.1 MGD capacity, once you hit that point or go over it, now you have to treat to a concentration that's actually less than the 4 and 0.3. So you become squeezed so it again, just one more time, it emphasizes the need to attack I&I to handle the compliance issues at the plant.
The pitfall that we're trying to avoid, because if we go back to when we started to meet, our concern wasn't about fines, because you can see from the timetable, we didn't know we were going to be fined and things. Our concern was to avoid a consent order or an order. Consent order meaning we agreed to it as opposed to the court enforcing it on us. And that's a tool that MDE uses a lot. They usually use it on the water side of things. They typically don't use it on the sewer side unless there is habitual problems, which is what you see up there. And a consent order could drastically impact our autonomy in what we're doing here, meaning that they would set goals. This is what you have to do. We'd have to kind of meet those goals. There's penalty for not meeting those goals. But in the meantime, they usually say no development, limited development, oversight. They want to know how many permits we're issuing, because the thought, which is not being said here, is you're not meeting permit because you have overflow, you have I&I, yet you're building new houses that are adding flow. So stop adding flow until you get this. Well, that would be disastrous to how we are conducting ourselves through town. So we are really trying to avoid that almost at all costs. It would be better to pay a fine than have a consent order. But that's a policy decision that, we may be taken out of it. And that's something the senator can help us with if it came down to it, is avoiding a consent order. What that means, so you can see how bad it gets, is if you don't follow the consent order, then they take you to court and it's automatically enforced as a judgment. We don't want that.
Any more questions, comments, or concerns? Would you like all you?
I don't know if it's appropriate or not. I didn't want to interject. Maybe had a couple. So for the record, Senator Justin Reedy, happy to represent Taneytown as part of my legislative district, resident of Manchester. About the cap, does that change every year? Does the amount they give you change every year? Does it
Town stays the same every year.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just from my own knowledge, what is, because we're obviously interfacing with MDE to try to facilitate a meeting and hopefully a longer term solution. What is the, is there in all the things that you all are doing with the plant, is there a more permanent solution, albeit perhaps a very, very expensive one? Or will the terracotta projects, will that go a long way towards a more permanent solution? I recognize that some of the projects left are pretty expensive. I'm just curious kind of what if it's all right for me to ask that question, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with that. I think the performance through the first 5-6 months of the year shows that with controlled flow, the systems that are in place at the plant are adequate to meet the limits. And that's what our study, our ENR study, and the pilot study told us a number of years ago. It's been the elevated flows and some equipment issues with some aging infrastructure at the plant that have led to the previous violations. And I think, the heightened awareness of the criticality of meeting the permit has shown that, yes, it's entirely feasible with the equipment that's out there and the facility that's out there.
So if the town is eventually able to continue to upgrade the facility with what you're doing, but also and fix some of the terracotta issue, that you'd be on a path to having this not be a perpetual annual problem.
Correct. Yep.
Give or take the occasional random year maybe where you have way more flow than you expected, but generally speaking.
Agreed.
Yeah, okay, yeah. From my perspective, I think that's as we talk to MDE and continue to interface with them, that may be something that, that's something I want to be able to argue to them too, because they're going to, it's hopefully incentivizing them to negotiate. So it's like, hey, this fine can come down, but also you won't have to continue to do this. I sort of question the fine issue when they ought to just require you to spend it on the things that address the problem if they were going to do that. But there's probably more to it than just state law in regards to that. There are some EPA factors at play as well. But thank you very much. So I'm sure we'll be continuing to talk and communicate as we have been. And one clarification to the council and to Mayor Miller, they've not gotten back to you all about an official meeting yet. We did send a letter earlier this year. Myself and actually our 3 delegates, Tomlinson, Rose, and Boucher, I've been communicating with them. They knew I'd be here tonight, and we're all, united on wanting to, help and try to get to the bottom of this and hopefully get this resolved. So, but we haven't heard back from them at our meeting.
As far as I'm aware, we have not heard back yet.
Okay. We'll try to keep working on that.
Thank you.
One last question, just if I may, regarding that, since the senator brought it up, there are a number of development projects that are in the pipeline. Will we be in a place where we can start allowing continued development? Are we on indefinite hold until this issue is resolved to MDE's satisfaction? Where do we stand with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think with the amount of development that I'm peripherally aware of, I don't think it's of a level that would cause any major concerns. I think Kevin's assessment of the recent issues with regard to phosphorus removal and how that came about, I think I see that as kind of independent of a bit more flow from some new development. Bless you. So, yeah, that's how I would see that.
Thank you.
Any additional comments, questions, or concerns? Well, I thank you guys for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys did a good job on that. Thank you. Up next, we got council member statement regarding conflicts of interest on the agenda items. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Hearing none, I'm going to proceed forward to the resolution, ordinances, and agreements. First up, we have introduction of ordinance 06-2023, clarification of dwelling types. This is just a further definition, clarification of the dwellings that we discussed at the workshop on Wednesday. Do we have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding that? I'm looking for a motion of introduction, or to introduce.
Move that we introduce the clarification of dwelling types for the ordinance.
Looking for a second.
I will second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. Next up, we have ordinance 07-2023, fiscal year 2022-2023, budget amendment number 3. This is the budget amendment that we talked about on Wednesday. Any questions, comments, or concerns regarding that? I am looking for a motion to introduce.
So moved.
I'm looking for a second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Ordinance 08-2023, fiscal year 2023-2024, budget amendment number 1. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, I am looking for a motion to introduce.
So moved.
Looking for a second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, we have adoptions. First up, we have the adoption of ordinance 05-2023A, Community Village Technical Amendments. Do we have any further questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, I am looking for a motion to adopt that ordinance.
I move that we adopt the community village technical amendments.
I'm looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, we have the adoption of resolution 2023-12, water allocation for August, our monthly water allocation. Any comments, questions, or concerns regarding that? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to adopt.
So moved.
I'm looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Adoption resolution 2023-13, nomination of resident agent. This is a requirement passed down from the state. Any questions, comments, or concerns regarding that? Not hearing any, I'm looking for a motion to adopt.
Make a motion.
Looking for a second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. City manager, we are to your reports.
Okay. Not a whole lot to add from the report, but I did want to just bring up, since we talked a little bit in our water discussion, and I didn't have it in front of me, it costs us $18,566 each quarter to do the billing cycle. So a little under $20,000 a quarter. So if we were to
That monthly, that would be.
to do that monthly,
three times
right,
that,
so,
yeah.
so we'd be looking at $222,796 a year to do monthly billing, and we would need to hire additional staff to do that.
We still have it to where they can request it though, right? As somebody is looking to request monthly billing.
So it's not monthly billing, but they can pay monthly.
Okay.
So, and then we just credit their account with each payment that they make, so that then when their bill comes out, if, say, it would have been a $300 bill and they paid $100 each month, they only owe $100 towards it.
For the people who are taking part in that, are you sending them a letter in the mail regarding what their, I guess, balance is currently?
No, there's not,
Just checking.
right, not correspondence that goes along with that.
Okay.
So, just wanted to give you that, so, because it might be a couple months before we talk about it again, and I might not have the spreadsheet handy, so that's it for me, unless anybody has questions.
Questions, comments, or concerns regarding the city manager report? Hearing none, we are moving to the department reports. Questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, we are moving over to the legal report.
Good evening, everybody. Great to see you in person. I want to follow up, since the last meeting, I sent you all a memo regarding the issue, or at least one of the issues, dealing with the sheriff's office and the Taneytown Police Department. And it concerned me enough that I wanted to put it in writing to you, and it concerns me enough that I wanted to highlight tonight some concerns that I have that I'm hoping you can address or can be addressed. The idea of having the sheriff's office come and work and audit with the city is probably a great idea. We did the same thing at the last change of administration when we didn't use the sheriff's office at the time, but we had basically the same points that the mayor laid out. We had somebody come in and check all those issues. And so it's a great type of policy thing to have a check. It doesn't hurt. The concern that I have is that using the sheriff's office the way we have, they've given us a proposal. We have a couple stumbling blocks that, when you have a good idea, we need to implement the good idea the right way. And the first stumbling block is the jurisdictional issue, and I outlined that to you all. As of right now, we do not have an MOU with the sheriff's office that allows the sheriff's office to have jurisdiction in the city of Taneytown, absent some extra criteria. Drugs, high-speed chases, and things like that. And while the major is going to work here, it doesn't give him any extra jurisdiction, so that's not an issue with him. It becomes an issue if, in his assisting us, he is requesting sheriff's office people to come and work in the town and do enforcement. So, for example, the example I'm going to use tonight is the commercial vehicle enforcement. If the commercial vehicle units came up here and did enforcement in the city limits, they have no authority to do so. If they pull anybody over and they have a car full of drugs, that's going to be a problem. Our officers could be there, but there's going to be a lot of concerns if our officers versus their officers. It just creates a liability concern. So the lack of this MOU has been something that has always been a problem between the sheriff's office and the city, because we're the only one in the entire county that doesn't have that MOU. And I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that you see how that really is like a precursor to certain things that we might want to do or might not want to do. So the jurisdiction issue is a big concern. I am concerned that the rank and file, both our people and their people, may not understand that. I know I've said it, I know I've written it, I'm sure it's been communicated, but just when I saw the email that came around about the commercial vehicle thing, it didn't seem like it was being done with the thought that we might have a jurisdictional issue. I'm sure they can figure something out, but it is still a valid concern on my part. The second issue that I have is that there doesn't seem to be a clear understanding of like a chain of command. And maybe that's not just with the major STEM issue, it might be with the whole police department issue. But typically, what we got, what the mayor requested and negotiated with the sheriff was a proposal for services. Forget that they're the sheriff and they're police. Pretend that they're a private company that does this. He requested a proposal and they said, this is what we can do for you. The fact that it doesn't cost us any money, forget that. Typically, we would say, yes, we'll agree to this proposal, and we would have some kind of a contract or arrangement that basically said, these are the things we expect you to do, and what I'm looking for, the word is a scope. It would have a scope of an agreement so that they know not to exceed it, and we know what to expect from them. But part of that scope would be a chain of command. I'm very concerned when I see that the major is here for basically 6 months full-time, and I don't know the details, but is he here for all that time reviewing the paperwork, or is he there giving direction and aid and directing our employees? I don't know. I'm concerned. The reason I'm concerned, back to my commercial vehicle thing, an email went around where it was the major to one of our employees, one of our supervisors, to set up a task force and told him to get some officers, told him to take it out of grant funding. That doesn't seem like a consultant to me. That seems more like somebody who is directing. Not a problem, because how would that happen in a normal world? The consultant would tell the leader, the boss, that I think this should happen, and boss would give the orders. So I'm concerned that there isn't a clear understanding on their part that they need to work through our chain of command. And then vice versa. You know, one of the things that was troubling when I went through this is we may not have a full-time or a real chief or whatever you want to call it, an appointed chief, but you appointed an acting chief. We have a chief of police who is acting. I don't understand the hierarchy between the major and our chief. It would seem like the major as a consultant would consult through our chief or through our personnel, and the chief would then communicate to the mayor and the manager. That's the way the charter's set up, is that the chief reports to the manager, supervised by the manager, mayor supervises the manager. So I'm concerned, is there confusion or could there be confusion? Again, it's over, I'm using an easy example like the vehicle thing, but then I saw last week that there was an incident with a weapon or with a gun or something. Is the major taking calls? Could the major be involved in that? I don't know, but maybe we should have something in writing to protect us. And so the chain of command is kind of an important issue for me. And I thought that as far as legally, I'm not talking policy-wise, all of that could probably be resolved if we had an agreement saying, this is what you offered to do, and this is how we want you to do it, and kind of laying it out. I don't know what that would look like, but it would seem to me that it would be clear then who the major reports to, because right now I think the discussion last week was it was going to report to the mayor and to the manager. That doesn't look like somebody who's consulting with the police department. That looks like it's somebody who's consulting with the council and the administration. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what we want. But it's not clear. And so you get the lawyer in me to say, I'm concerned because when things aren't clear and when things go bad, everybody's going to point fingers to say, how come you didn't? You know, if he slips and falls in our department, we're not paying him. He's not our employee, but he's here all the time. Does he take direction from us? What are those types of things looking at? I'd love to have a document where it says we're not expected to pay for this. I know we're not going to, but I'd like an agreement that says, yes, we're loaning you personnel. If you loan Kevin to another town for 6 months, wouldn't you want to have some arrangement in writing where they know what they're supposed to do? So I'm not poo-pooing the idea. I think it's great that we are going to examine how things are done because I think we know that that can always be improvement. I just think that we need to implement it just a little bit more formally to protect the city. And so I wanted to put that out for you to think about, not necessarily to do anything about, but think about how we could do that and what that would look like and things like that. So those were my concerns about my memo. And I thought my memo was self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, I'm certainly glad. And that's been enough this month to deal with, so, unless you have any other questions.
I mean, it kind of raises the question that I didn't think about originally, but the question about workman's compensation and liability insurance. Like you said, if he slips and falls on the job here, is that our liability? Is that Westminster or Carroll County's liability? He gets injured in that slip and fall. Is that, are we responsible for that? He's working here for us as a consultant.
And it shouldn't be, right? He's their employee.
But
wouldn't you love to have
I would tend
that?
to agree. I would like to see some kind of.
Well, when we have people do road work for us, work at the plant, they sign a contract and in the back says, we're going to indemnify you for any problem. I mean, it's a simple thing like that. And that goes along with the chain of command. I've been confused, and I expressed it to the city manager, things like the promotion thing that you saw. We were all asked to do the promotion. I was confused why that came not through the chain of command. It was from the lieutenant to you. We have an acting chief. You've asked the consultant to review it, which is perfectly legit because he knows exactly how it's done in other agencies, so that makes sense. But I would think that everything you're holding accountable is your acting chief. And if you're not going to hold the acting chief accountable, then you need a new acting chief. And I'm just wondering what more am I missing if these are the things I'm seeing? And
I had the same concerns. I looked at everything because I wasn't here. And the first thing I said is, who in the hell's on first?
right.
And then the thing from the lieutenant, I said, why are we getting this from him? Why is it not from the acting chief? And they got both names in each corner.
So So I mean, I think this is something that, we've done this in numerous other areas where we bring people in to help. They're outsiders, regardless of where they're come from. They're outsiders that come to help. I do it all the time for people. But I think that to protect us, we need to make sure we know what they're supposed to do and we know what the engagement is. You know, normally, if I'm consulting for a place, I want them to say, yes, you're going to provide me a desk, you're going to provide me with this, you're going to provide me with that. Maybe he has all that, but it was shocking to hear that he was, like, his post is here for the next 6 months. I mean, I'm shocked that the sheriff's department would let a major, I mean, that's a high-ranking person, come here for 6 months. And when you look at the man-hours involved, that's like almost 1,000 man-hours. Is that necessary? I mean, if you hired me and I said it's going to cost 1,000 hours of time, you'd be saying, wow, I mean, that's a big project. What do you hope to do per hour or per segment? So I appreciate the sheriff, I appreciate the mayor saying that we should probably do this because we did it before. But I want to make sure that, and again, I don't want to go on too much, but it just makes, I've lost sleep over it. I've told some of you that. Like, if the major goes into the evidence room and says, this is how we're going to deal with it, and he actually has involvement in the evidence room, that could affect the chain of custody of the evidence that we have on hand. I am sure that our major is not going to let that happen, but I would want something in writing that in the event it did happen, even by accident, it doesn't come back on us. So that's what you pay me for, is to be the worry ward. So.
Can I ask a history question?
Oh, God.
Why do we not have an MOU with the county sheriff's office for enforcement in Taneytown?
Well, are you asking me and you want me to give you my opinion?
I put that question out to anybody who might know that answer. I've only been here 6 years, and so I don't know all of those ins and outs or what may have happened. You know, but I'd be interested to know if every other town in the county allows the county sheriff's office to have police authority in their towns as well as their town police, why we do not.
Okay, I'll
I
answer
think this
for you
would
then.
go towards this half of the room who is,
I'll give you mine. This is my opinion, but I've been here as long as, you know, and I'll say it. I think that, now, it's not the current sheriff, right? Because he came and inherited what Sheriff Tregoning, and before that was Sheriff Brown. We didn't have any of that. And we had a very seasoned chief forever. Who was the chief that was here? Tyler. Mel Diggs. Right? And Mel Diggs was not going to let anybody play in his sandbox. And he certainly, the sheriff's office was not going to want to, if you don't get cooperation, you're like, fine, I'm not going to help type of thing. And that continued on, and I guess they would call it parochialist or exclusionist, where we say, we don't want your help. Much to our, I think, our detriment in the years where there was a drug task force, we were not, meaning we, the city, were not allowed to participate. Maybe they say we were. But instead, we joined the state police drug task force and weren't on the county drug task force, which, again, parochialism. And so you get to the point where there was the problems where they didn't trust us. You know, they had that kind of look down your nose attitude. I'm talking about in the later years of the Tregoning side, where we weren't allowed to participate. And the only thing that we were able to make a bond on was they let us on the SWAT team. We had a member who was on the SWAT team for years, which was, they called it something different, but that's what it was. And so that was helpful, but not as helpful as being on the drug task force, where you have drug problems in town. So that's my opinion, is that there has never been the hand out to let's make arrangements to better this. The one thing that was always argued was, you got to remember, you all are taxpayer, you're county taxpayers too. Your county tax money pays for these sheriffs. You don't get any benefit from that unless you're outside the town limits. The interesting part is our new sheriff, so Sheriff DeWeese, when he came on board, he reached out and said, I want an MOU with the city that allows our city officers to be deputy sheriffs. So all of our city officers are deputized as deputy sheriffs so that they can enforce the laws outside the town, right? But it wasn't reciprocal, okay? So And that was specific. That was not supposed to be reciprocal.
I kind of tossed that out there as a, moving forward as part of this and post major STEM, and it's not something we have to act on right away, but is it time to shake hands and play nice with the sheriff's office?
Well, that's one of the discussions the mayor's had, where you saw on that laundry list of things there, like you were doing the easy stuff first and you got to the hard stuff. When it talks about, what was it, dispatching and something else, it was one of those, that means more than what you think it means, okay? That, we are dispatched from the Maryland State Police. We are not dispatched through the county people. We are allied with the Maryland State Police if we need something. They provide backup, not necessarily the sheriff's office. That's the parity that you have here that I think the mayor is trying to close the gap on. And if that's where you're headed, then you want to build the foundation up front of how to do that. So my conscience is clear. I feel I've advised you that this is a positive thing, but we need to make sure we do it exactly, right.
Well, Jay, you've kind of left us in a spot. I mean, what you say is 100% true. There's nothing that I disagree with from what you just said. But what concerns me is, what can we do about it? I mean, I've been concerned from the day one. I asked questions of Major STEM last week, and he attempted to explain himself, but didn't really amount to anything, in my opinion. It seems like if we're operating without a MOU, we ought to stop that. We shouldn't operate without an MOU. It seems like we're operating with two acting police chiefs, and we don't really need two acting police chiefs. We need one or the other. We got to decide who that's going to be. And if indeed we decide that Major Mitchell is the acting police chief, then I suppose if this liaison from the sheriff's department continues, then he needs to report to Major Mitchell. The other aspect about the non-fees, that may be well and good. We may not be charged for these services. I don't understand that. I mean, just like you say, the second ranking police officer in the sheriff's department's giving us 6 months of his time for free, doesn't make any sense at all. If there's no outright charge, I bet dollars to donuts that it shows up in the city-county agreement when it comes to fruition next spring. And we really can't afford that. We don't get enough now to compensate our taxpayers for the services we provide versus what the county provides. Should we, and I'm asking for advice here, should we make a motion suspending this operation until we have an MOU? And then after we have the MOU, decide on whether that's something we can live with or want?
Well, the lawyer in me always wants you to have something in writing. But the horse is out of the barn for the large part. The problem that I have, and I am not trying to interject into the management of this, but I can't fathom from the information I have, and I might not be as close to it as you all, how this actually works. So if you told me write up an agreement, I would write an agreement that says this is what you're going to provide, and I'd reference the proposal they gave the mayor. I don't know if that's what's happening down there. I haven't heard from my guy down there, which is Major Mitchell.
There's no accountability.
That's my thought is Major Mitchell should be the person that I would say, so tell me, what happens down there on a daily basis with this guy? I'm sure I'm sure you all know this. I'm sure Jim knows this. But for me, like when you say, could I come up with an agreement or a recommendation? I really don't know how it's working. The only thing that really was a concern was when we talked about the commercial vehicle enforcement. And I said, I can't in good conscience let that happen without saying something, because there will be a citizen or a truck driver pulled over if it's in town, and there's no authority to do that. And I can't sit back, regardless of whether you want to hear it or not. I can't sit back for that.
The other thing about this is, and this has been from the very first council meeting since I returned from council back in May. We've been talking about a police chief and police problems and police issues. And still nothing has happened. The mayor gave an explanation Wednesday night about why, but that doesn't solve the problem, the fact that we don't have a police chief. When we do get a police chief, what happens when he comes in and he says, well, I don't like what the major suggested. I'm not going to do any of that. And he gets to pick his own rules. We shouldn't tie the hands of our future police chief, which I hope is not far away, although it seems like it's dragging on and on. We can't tie the hands of our future police chief by a set of arbitrary rules that has come up by somebody who doesn't have any authority. I mean, none of this makes any sense to me. I don't understand. You keep saying I didn't understand it. Well, I don't understand either.
Were you in the meeting? You were not in the meeting when the sheriff's office came to discuss this happening. Were you in that meeting? I guess my question is, who was in that meeting? Because as the police liaison, I was not invited to that meeting, so I'm in the dark. But who was in that meeting? Because it seems like legal should have been there, in my opinion. But I also think I should have been there. But
So to start off, how this all came about, me, Jay, and Jim all met together to go over it. When we went over it, I was assured that ducks were in a row, that yes, we were going to go through a specific process, certain items were going to be brought to council, but that we were in a good position to go forward with this. That was my understanding when we were in that meeting. As far as the meeting at the police department, that was a meeting between me and the officers to explain to them the situation, what is coming to the department. And at I would think would have been the Artisan Fest, I did tell you that we were going to have that meeting with the officers.
right, so I assumed that then I would be invited to it as the liaison. And I also would think that you would have legal there. I mean, I know that you were just explaining it to them, but when did the person from the sheriff's office then come in to meet with everyone?
He came in that Monday. This is where I'm a little confused as to where you got the information. There was a meeting between the sheriff's major and all of our police
But
officers.
shouldn't there have been?
That would have been at the discretion of the police department. But again, I guess my next question would be, define to me what the police liaison role is. What is its responsibilities?
I don't know.
Do you
They're
see-
not
do
communicating with me, and I wasn't at that
Do
meeting,
you
so
see
I
the,
don't
do you
know.
see the liaison role anywhere in charter or code? Is it anywhere in charter or code? Can anybody answer me whether police liaison is in charter or code?
Yes. You
Where?
appointed her as the liaison, and you make all the appointments as mayor.
But where is the police liaison role in the charter or
It
code?
doesn't have any writing, but you appointed her as the police liaison. So
But
that's
then
how she got
what are those specifics? Have I ever specified that I need to invite her to a meeting?
No, no. What I'm saying is, she didn't just make it up, neither did any of you, that you were liaisons. You appointed them the liaison. So
I
you
think it
have
was
to
made
give
before
them-
I came here, but that'd be my
What you
biggest
did on the
thing.
first day was you established who was what
Who
liaison.
was the liaison, yes, but the police liaison has been a role that's been here forever, but the idea is it has never been defined as to what that liaison actually is. There's nothing in code, there's nothing in charter to
so
say
you
what
would
its
define that.
responsibilities are. So my definition would be, again, that was a meeting between me and the officers. I told you that
So I
I told
guess-
you we were having that meeting, I told you I'd have a follow-up as to what that meeting was about. You received that follow-up that Friday, as did all the other council members. As far as the police chief search,
Why have a liaison? I guess is my next question. Like, do you even really need me to be in that role? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really doing anything, so.
Well, before we switch to the police chief, I took your question as, this was I saw a proposal, we met about the proposal. I said, this proposal is good to go. I gave you my advice, which was laid on the memo of what you could do, not do, your call of what to do. There was a meeting before the proposal was issued, right? I mean, you met, they didn't just send you a proposal, so you met with people about what they could do for us. Okay, so I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Not the implementation on the back end, on the front end.
Because I kind of would have wanted you to see the proposal.
Well, and I did after, so there was a meeting, I assume, where somebody from the sheriff's office met with at least the mayor, maybe the
Yeah,
manager.
the city manager was there as well, if I remember correctly.
And the police, our acting chief was there or no?
He was not there at the time of that meeting. He was
Okay.
invited to the meeting after that.
So I understand, they say, hey, you're looking for some help, we can do these things, yada, 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 what do you think? You guys said, hey, that sounds great, write us something up, more or less, right? So they wrote something up. That was what's shared, that was probably in July. That's what I'm calling the proposal. That proposal contained things that needed council approval, and that proposal contained things that did not need council approval. As in my memo, what I'm saying is, if the police chief decided to get somebody to come in and audit their files, you would never even hear about it, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about on this level. So if the police chief decided to have somebody come in and audit the files, there would be an agreement, right? We did that with our auditor. This is what we expect you to do. So I'm not saying anything's wrong with the proposal. I'm just saying that normally you put an agreement in place to execute the proposal with the limits of this is what we want you to do. And as we saw, there are several layers of the proposal. Some of them can be done just because, that's management, but some of them are policy. And so we probably need to lay out in that proposal to the guy who is doing it or the agency that's performing it, that these things you are not to do because those are implementation of policy. So that's what I'm arguing. There's nothing wrong with what the mayor has done. It's the fact that we need to memorialize what we expect this guy to do. Not the other way around. Like, I don't want to talk to Major Stem and say, what do you expect to do? I think we're telling him, this is what we expect you to do. And this is what we expect you to report to. And these are our expectations.
And that is what we have done. Is that what you're saying?
We have not done that yet.
That is what we have not done. I guess that's why I feel like I'm in the dark. And maybe I don't need to be in the light. I just was shocked by some of the things that he said. While I knew that he was coming here to provide us this service, I had no idea that he was essentially going to be the acting chief. Well, or at least that's how I understand it.
And I think that it's exactly what you're talking about, is to clearly define roles, reporting structure, liability issues, limitations on authority. Those things should be clearly defined.
That's what I'm ringing the bell about. It's not about the content. I mean, I'll give you another example. When we have somebody come in and do a training down there, you all don't approve that. You don't get involved in it, but it's an outsider that comes in and provides a service. And I'm assuming they have some understanding of how they're going to do it and how they're going to pay for it. Easy peasy. Ours should be that even more because of the fact of the optics. You know, that's what I got into. I mean, it looked like, I'm watching it on TV, our chief is sitting here and the major's up there telling all the things that he's going to do when he gets here. And I was like, well, the chief should be the one doing that. This are all the things I'm going to work with this guy to do, type of thing. Again, it's just optics of how it looks, but that got me thinking, well, shouldn't we have an agreement so this guy knows that he's not running the police department?
Right, so, I mean, those things are water under the bridge at this point in time, and like you said, the horse is a good ways out of the barn, and if positive things are happening, we shouldn't stop that to do this, but I think you're right that certain things ought to be memorialized. I'm in favor of what was done, it just needed to be cleaned up in how it was done. And just, and I'm not talking anything major about what the major is doing or not doing. I'm just talking about making sure we have our bases covered so that we don't have anything untoward happen. That's just the defense.
So this kind of all plays in together. So let's go over to the police chief, for instance. Who would want to apply for a police chief position where the council is essentially the current acting police chief? For a police promotion process, is it the norm to have to go to the council for a police promotion process?
No.
I mean, even the simple things, for a while, our police department thought they couldn't do any movement because the idea that had been handed down from the previous mayor was keep it steady, keep it how it's going, don't make any changes. We have policy that has fallen to the wayside. We have, again, a council that is overreaching into the police department to begin with. So when you're asking me why we don't have a new police chief yet, giving you solutions for a new police chief. You said that wasn't good enough. You wanted the process. We put the process back out. We have advertised it. We have spent we're going to come up on 2.5 months of advertising it. We have 4 applicants right now. Do you think that's because of me?
Where have we advertised?
Jim, would you like to answer where we've advertised it?
Well, the MML site still doesn't have that classified section back up yet, so it's pretty much been police app. We've expanded to print media, so Carroll County Times, Frederick News Post, because we weren't seeing the applicants that we were with the first round just through police app. We've tried the Maryland Police Executives Association and the Maryland Chiefs Association, and both of those are like members-only platforms online, and have reached out to both organizations and kind of struck out with getting them to host our ad. So pretty much the usual somewhat local things, plus police app is of course national, but one of the requirements that we started out with also was Maryland law enforcement experience is what we were looking for also, rather than from elsewhere in the country. There also was a residency requirement that the mayor wanted to have in there, with an eye towards the idea of the chief being, community policing and part of the community. And suspecting that they may have discouraged some applicants, we also removed that before we went with the print media to broaden it.
Have we got any new applicants since we have made those removals?
No notifications from police apps, so no.
What about the FBI, the special training that they do for the police officers? They have an alumni newsletter. Or Montgomery County, Howard County, any of the other, county jurisdictions, they all have newsletters or hiring pages. I know of 2, a police chief that retired and is now going to go be, a chief for a little town out in Seattle or Washington or somewhere out west, because that's where his wife's family lives. I mean, that's typically what they do, is they retire from, this long career with a department and then look to settle somewhere. So then they become part of the community. At this point, I think what we need is somebody from the outside who has more than just local training or local standards or local whatever. We need to reach outside of that and kind of start from scratch.
Even broadening the search, it takes a quick look at council's gear towards the police department. I mean, I'd question coming into a situation like this. Our acting police chief, while yes, you call him the acting police chief, isn't really the acting police chief. He's the guy that's just there that people report to every day. The council still has purview over most of it. While I don't see who is readily just waiting to come to the situation that has been developed. We had candidates on the last round. Letters were sent out telling them, no, thank you, we found our guy. Unfortunately, we did not find our guy.
Have we reached back out to those people?
A couple of them have applied, and a couple of them have already found new jobs, and the situation
We
was,
did reach out to those people, you're saying.
I think the majority of them we reached out to.
Did we, Jen?
We didn't reach out directly. We put it back out on police app, and some of the folks who had applied the
But we
first round
did not
reapplied.
reach out to those people.
Like individually with emails after we sent the letters of saying, hey, no, thank you, we found our guy?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
No, we did not reach out to any of the candidates that didn't move forward in the selection process last time.
Because as I recall, we had a 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
So did we reach out
One
again to 2 and 3?
One of those has been hired elsewhere.
Okay.
We are aware. One, I think, was perhaps a distant third, but we have not reached out to any of those because they were deemed not to be the ideal candidate for the city.
By the last police search.
Correct.
So again, I'm not the one who's made this search a year long. This is, I've been here 3 months, so I mean, you could chalk 3 months
My
up for me.
suggestion to you, Mayor, was to cast a much wider net on that search and rewrite the job description so that a civilian could apply for it, could qualify for it. As our attorney told us, you do not have to be a police officer.
Not in Maryland, anyone can be appointed chief. Whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, depends on the person.
Maybe I'm
Exactly, it depends on the person.
maybe I'm misunderstanding, but my understanding was council wanted somebody who was qualified to be a police officer, who could meet the qualifications and I guess certify as one. Was, maybe I'm misremembering it, but that was my understanding.
I saw that in the job description. I think it's
That's,
always been in the job description.
that was my understanding of what we were searching for. I
That
think
actually was what tripped up the
the last candidate.
last.
Was the fact that even though he wasn't a police officer, he could never really be a police officer, therefore we didn't want him because he couldn't. But it is, the law doesn't say you have to have a police officer. And anyone can be your police chief as long as you pick them to be your police chief. That's it. And then they become a police officer because of that. No training, no nothing.
And again, just to go back, my understanding from council was they wanted somebody, that's why we rejected the last guy, so
Well,
it wouldn't have made sense to
You all
me.
approved the job description that had that in there, right?
Yes.
Right. So the council, your understanding is, yeah, you're right. The council approved a job description that said, we want a certified police officer. So yes, that's what they wanted, and that may be too much. I mean, that's
That's what I'm suggesting, maybe that's too much.
Yeah. Is that the bridge too far? We need to take back out of the
Well-
job description, see if that widens our candidate pool.
if you,
But the question is, do we then get lesser candidates because of it?
well, look around. Do you have any, I mean, can you name any place where they picked somebody who wasn't a police officer at some point in their life? I mean, I can't think of that.
There has to be professionals that specialize in hiring
That was my next thought.
police officers and supervisory police personnel. And they're the people we need to be reaching out to.
I assume that
I
comes
get,
with
I
cost.
get solicitations every single week. Being a loan officer, people wanting me to come work for them. And I bet you that they're, and I don't know any names, but I bet you that they're professional organizations that specialize in recruiting police people and putting them in positions. There's probably a fee that has to be paid.
Yeah.
But if we get the person that we want, so what? It's better than sitting here and having two acting police chiefs. I mean, that's the whole problem. If we had to put the effort into hiring our police chief by going to a professional agency and saying, we need a police chief in Taneytown, what can you come up with? I bet you that there'd be 50 of them on the table by the time we hung up the phone. We're spinning our wheels.
I don't disagree.
And the longer we spin our wheels,
When we went out for the city manager
the more
search, how much
confusing the situation gets.
should we
It's
spend when we
not
went out
good
for the city
police,
manager search?
It's
About
not
20
good
grand,
for
wasn't
us, and it's.
20,000. How many candidates did we get?
I don't remember.
Was it
15?
a lot
Not in the triple digit. I mean, how many viable candidates? I think it was like 15.
for
20.
for $20,000?
I think it was 20. Might have been 26, but it was 20 something. And we didn't use any of the candidates that were picked. I mean, we had him all along.
We did have them all on.
Right.
I don't see the justification of spending that kind of money on something like that. I don't. Not only would it be a slap in the face to our officers that we already have at the police department, saying our town is willing to spend that kind of money to try to, I guess, find somebody outside of the department. You know, council's already said that they won't consider somebody internally, but that's just an extra slap in the face, in my opinion, that we're gonna spend that kind of money to look out there. But And again, I've had it for 3 months, we haven't had a police chief for how long?
November?
You guys rushed it before. It was botched. We lost the guy. There's no reason to rush it now. We get it done right. We find our new police chief. We hope that applications pick back up, but you have to remember there is a climate that has been established over our police department, and a lot of that has to go back to council.
I don't know about that.
I'd definitely say so.
Well, with your help.
And with my help, I didn't, whew. That's fun.
Not.
Okay, so I think what we need to do is, we need to decide how this MOU is going to come about. That's a,
I would just urge that we use just a little common sense in getting us, the horses out of the barn. The sheriff's office has offered to help. How do you not allow that? The mayor and I talked about that. They've put a lot of considerable effort behind trying to think this out. So why would you slap the hand away? That's not going to get us where we want to be, right?
no, I don't think anyone.
And it's good for our city, and that's,
Right, I mean-
I believe we could get more in writing. I'm perfectly fine with getting that done.
Could you check with Sheriff DeWeese
Yeah,
and find out
we
if they had
can-
some kind of agreement with Westminster
Yes,
when they
we-
did this whole process with them and just
I was going to ask
duplicate
that.
that?
I was going to ask, and I was like thinking, if they said, no, we didn't have one, that still wouldn't make me happy, just because they didn't do it right.
Yeah, well, I agree, but
So I would think that if you want my path forward, I know you always, I look like I created the problem, now I got to tell you how to get out of it, but, I mean, I wouldn't be looking at the code and the charter and all that. We're talking about common sense stuff that should benefit the city, right? So we should have some type of an agreement where the sheriff's office people, I don't know who they are, work with our people to implement this, including our acting chief, right? Because I would think we'd want his buy-in because you're not there, none of you. The city manager can't be there. He's the one to make sure this guy is doing the right thing. I'm making this up, but wouldn't it be terrible if the major was down there recruiting people to go to the sheriff's office? Right? I mean, they're not going to do that, but you have to make sure they're supervised in what people do. So
not only that, if you read the plan, he's actually talking about bringing in other personnel from the sheriff's office to assist in the evidence chain of command stuff, or chain of custody stuff rather, and a few other things. So, clearly he's intending on bringing other people in from his department to assist with this. So we really need to make sure that we have those limitations spelled out, and I don't think that that's a bad idea at all.
That's fine. We can get that done.
Yeah, and I think can be seamless as far as he's down there. He's already been there, a week? He knows what he's up against. He knew before
And
he got
we
here.
already have stuff on the way next week as far as policy and stuff like that. Council will be seeing some of that. And so far it is doing what we needed. That's fine, but we can get more clarification on it, perfectly fine with that. But this plan is doing what it was intended to do, and I have faith that it's going to over its
Limitations and
term.
liabilities, that's where we're.
And, we talked about all along that there were things that can be implemented, no problem. But there are things that need to have a structure, and we should make sure we highlight that very clearly of where the no-go areas are. Then that would at least get us solid with the legal side of the sheriff's office participation, right? That would make me happy. And then the question you all grapple with is, if you do this, I can't see us doing it without the input and the cooperation of Major Mitchell. He's your guy down there. If he is not your guy down there, then you need to get a different guy down there, right? Because he is the manager of the police department. Isn't that the case? So,
To a degree with the limits that have been set up.
well, exactly to the limits that are set up. So we should be sitting, I know when we do this agreement, just like when I do agreements for Kevin and everybody else, it goes to them to say, are you good with this? Because I'm not there to see, is this what you wanted? And, the mayor raises a point. You all aren't going to be the police chief, neither is the mayor. You picked him to be the acting police chief. You got to support him to be the acting police chief. And if you don't, then pick someone else. It's not fair to him. So that's why I'm saying is some sheriff's people, the chief, the manager, and me, we can hammer this out, and then we can get us over the hump. that would make me lose a lot less sleep.
My only concern as far as actually getting it done has always been, we'd be here talking 5 separate council meetings, just deliberating, trying to get this done. We'd be here almost, you don't think so?
Well, I don't want you all to deliberate on it at all.
And that's,
I don't think this is
I want to
our,
bring it to you
No,
like an
that's-
agreement we do with the cell towers or anything else, saying,
No.
we are comfortable with
Right.
how this is implemented, and we want to tell you this is how it should be done. If you question our judgment, we're happy to talk about it, but we're your people. If we're good with it, you should be good with it, to a general extent, right? Thank you for indulging me. I hope I don't have any more problems
I'm
with sleepless nights.
Still not clear on what you're saying. Even if we come up with an agreement, should we continue this relationship without an agreement? In other words, should we suspend what we're doing now until an agreement is in place?
I would think that the directive should be given from the manager to our major, to their major, to say, you just need to continue to do your policy and procedure review. Don't bring anybody else in. Don't do anything. Remember, you don't have to do every 6-month thing in one day. And in the meantime, the other major, help work out an agreement with us. That'll make us happy.
as far as the truck enforcement goes, I know we had a date lined up for that. If they're doing it outside of city limits to help train our officers, we're still good on that, are we not? Because my understanding from the beginning is it is always going to have been outside of city limits truck enforcement, and our officers were going to be there on site to be trained on it. But
I don't know any details except what I saw. And that was the concern that set me on the edge, because the other major, the sheriff's major, was directing our corporal to set this up and telling it how many people, how many hours, and how it was going to be paid out of what line item. And I, as a consultant, I can't imagine I would be able to give that directive to people. So it's not the issue, it's the method. Whether they should be doing it out of town, but I don't know whether that was ever considered or not, so.
sounds good. We'll get some written, I'm sure you'll be at work with the sheriff's department and whatnot on that, then
They're easy to work with. I mean, that's no problem.
I'm looking forward to it. We have any more for legal report?
That's enough, isn't it?
Sounds good. No old business, heading to new business, monthly financial, or actually, let me ask, was there any further questions, concerns, comments on that before we move on? No. Hearing none, moving on. No old business to new business, monthly financial report. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments regarding it?
No, sir.
Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the monthly financial report.
I'm looking for a second.
I will second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion moves. Next, we have the accounts payables. Any questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, I am looking for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Looking for second, got second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion moves. Approval of special event permit Maryland Howe Horse Rescue Fundraising Concert Memorial Park, December 17th, 2023. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Looking for a second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next, we have the Planning and Zoning Commission nominations. This is just moving the alternative into the regular spot, correct?
And reappointing Jim Parker.
And reappointing Jim Parker. Questions, comments, or concerns regarding that? That it's the same people that are already on the board, they're just being shifted around? I am looking for do I need to do it individually, or are we good just to?
You do it as a group if everybody's okay.
Just a quick question, are we looking for a new alternate?
Yep, gonna hopefully post out, hopefully get some people for September to present.
Okay.
I am looking for a motion to approve those nominations to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion moves. Chicken husbandry, this is a ask for a consensus. We already got a consensus. That was a yes a couple months ago. However, there's been some renewed debate on it. So I just want to affirm the direction that we are going so we are not wasting staff time and resources as we're doing it. If the consensus comes back, another yes, we'll continue forward. If not, we'll go the opposite direction. So to do this, I'm going to go down the roll looking for a consensus just to make sure I can, correct? I want to make sure that we are going individually, getting what everybody is consenting to. Yeah, sounds like it can be done. Questions, comments, or concerns before we get to it? This is trying to make brief statements, brief questions, comments, concerns before we get to the consensus part of it.
The statement I made Wednesday night, I still stand by. The ordinance itself looks like it's pretty well prepared. But my idea of thinking we're just compounding our problems, I'm willing to reconsider is what I'm trying to say. If you can come to us with some kind of outline as to how that plan is going to be administered, who's going to administer it, and what are the fines, and how are we going to inspect these things, how are we going to check these things? And we have a pattern of, if we have a plan on how we're going to enforce that ordinance, I'd be willing to reconsider my opinion.
Yeah, y'all still have full say in the ordinance. This is just a consensus for staff to continue working towards ordinance form. You guys, the ordinance will come to y'all for approval, questions, comments, reform, anything like that. This is just a consensus, letting us know what direction the town needs to head.
How's the ordinance going to be administered? Who's going to administer it, and what are the fines attached to it, and what are the inspection schedules, and what are the penalties?
I think we
you
have
saw
to,
the other night what they were.
So that's what will come next.
we
That's
have
what
to
comes
resolve
next in
the
this
question
process.
first, because
But I don't
if
have
we
any of those
don't,
answers. I don't have any of those answers.
But you're just saying yes to them giving you those answers.
Yeah, they're basically if you consensus yes to this, that is the clear indication to staff to continue working in the direction that they're heading as far, as preparing an ordinance for you guys to review. And at that point, that's where you'd ask those questions, those comments, concerns, anything that needs to be changed, anything that doesn't meet council's satisfaction. But again, this is just the consensus to make sure we are using city resources and time wisely as we are heading towards
Right.
that ordinance.
the question tonight is yes or no, do we want residents
Just
to have
plain
chickens?
yes and no.
Period, yes or no, is what we're looking for tonight, correct?
Yep, that is the point for tonight. I just need
Again,
a yes or
if-
no.
If the ordinance presented with the answers to my question, I would support it. If they were satisfactory, if we were hemming and hawing, unsure about it and uncertain, and there was no clear definition, I wouldn't support it. That's just my opinion.
And that's the next
I don't know
step.
anybody else.
That's the next step in the process is the ordinance. That, again, we
An
still,
ordinance for the sake of an ordinance doesn't do anything.
I think that's what we're trying to fix.
First of all, if I was thinking about chickens, and I read that stuff that we had the other night, I'd stop thinking about chickens. I wouldn't do it.
I think that's part of the intent of it. Yeah, that's the intent of it, is for people who are not committed to chickens to deter themselves away from it. Because yes, chickens they're a task. It isn't just get a chicken, put it in your backyard, it's good to go. It is a task. So again, I'm just going to go down the roll, look for the consensus, starting from the left, Councilmember Tillman.
I am ambivalent on the order, on the actual question of whether or not I want residents to have chickens. I just don't honestly care. I just care about whether or not we have a ordinance in place that, whether we say no or whether we say yes, that we have an ordinance that correctly reflects city policy. But for the purposes of tonight, I will say yes. We have people in town with chickens, so let's figure out how to make sure we do that right.
Councilmember Cheney?
Yes.
Councilmember McCarron?
Sorry.
A yes or a no for the consensus? Yes. Councilmember Foster?
Yes.
Councilmember Fuller?
Yep.
Sounds good. The consensus is a yes. We'll continue towards an ordinance to be presented. Next up, I have one more thing that I want to go over, the police promotion process. At the last workshop meeting on Wednesday, it was asked that we get basically a sign off from Major Stem. I know legal has some additions that I was aware of that wanted added to the process, and I think the idea would be I'd be looking for emotional approval contingent on adding those processes that our legal would like to add to it. If you'd like to go into explanation of what those are.
My concern wasn't necessarily with the process. You read a lot of pages. It was the very front of the thing. It was like in the cover letter, which talked about, and I think you used the word interdepartmental. It was something to that effect. I don't think that there's a certain, in police departments, depending on the agency size, there are promotions that should come from within. And I would call those supervisory positions. So like a corporal, a sergeant, people that should be in the department and supervise the people under them. There then are administrative positions. So those are the ones that make policy, right? So if you think about it in the military, the enlisted people carry out the orders and the officers make the policy. So like lieutenants, I'm making that break here because those are the ranks we have, but so lieutenants and such. I don't think that we should be required to hire from interdepartmental for policy-making decisions. I think that this process should apply for the supervisory positions because that's key. But if you were a police chief or your council and you want to bring in outside people to administer policy, that should be something we consider. And so when I read that, I just wanted to make sure that we do not hamstring ourselves by saying you must hire within for those types of policy-making people. So that was my concern.
So what I'm just looking for would either be a motion to approve with the contingencies that the legal has offered onto it. This has been signed off Major Stem as well, which was a request of the workshop last week. Would anybody like to carry that motion or move that motion?
I would like to say that I still have a mild concern on some vagary of the language. It talks about a written test, and this is a written test, if any. And the chief of police or his designee will determine whether an examination will be part of the promotion process. It just seems like it leaves a lot of stuff open, and I'm not an HR guy, and I'm not a police guy, and I don't know if that's how it's normally done, but it seemed a little vague to me, and I was mildly concerned with that. And I don't know since you're sitting here, Jay, what your opinion is on that.
The vagaries that I was concerned with throughout I didn't even think mentioning it, but I think it says deputy police chief.
Yeah.
My concern was we
don't
may
have
not have one of those.
Yeah.
Right? So I was thinking that it would just be a word search where you change deputy police chief to police chief or his designee. That's what we're talking about anyway.
Some of those things, yeah.
Just to check this promotion process, we're just looking at having this until we get the next police chief, correct? I imagine that is the goal.
I don't want to hold up a whole process based on that.
But because the next police chief
I
should
would
be
like
the
that to be a
one,
little bit tighter.
the next
that's
police
all.
chief should be the one who is doing these processes, who is actually coming up with them. Because again, council, well, I know they want to have the saying, this really isn't a process for council, this is a process for the police department.
Maybe we should term this interim. Because what happens is, a year or two from now, because we don't have that many vacancies we're talking about, they look back and say, oh, well, this is the policy.
Yep.
Nobody ever knew that. So interim policy, and then it's pretty open for them to say, okay, we're
And
changing.
if
So
the
do we-
new chief
do we
likes
wanna
it,
change it
he or
to
she
a-
can keep it. If not, he or she can
Interim
revise it.
police promotion process for a year contingent on legal's excerpts that they want added. I'm looking for a motion to move that forward. Can move as said.
I'll make that motion that we can move this forward contingent upon the corrections that we just discussed with the attorney.
I'm looking
Is that too
for,
vague, or is that okay?
You want to include the word interim policy?
And yes, make exactly what we just said, and make it an interim policy.
interim police promotion process for a year
Contingent on
contingent
city
on city
attorneys.
attorneys.
Approval, how's that?
And that is motion moved as said, I guess, right?
Yeah, as amended.
So I'm looking for a second on that.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye?
All those opposed, say nay. The motion moves. Next up, we have the council member reports. Starting from the left, Councilmember Tillman, you are up.
We had a busy month in planning and zoning. One of the things that I did last week was I went to the Maryland Municipal League Summer Summer Symposium that was on cannabis and how to handle that how to handle the new cannabis law as a matter of policy for our municipalities. It was very informative. My understanding is we're not in line for any of the current licensing. The next round of licensing probably won't hit for a year to 18 months. We may be in line for some of that, but we have to actually sit down and look at our maps and see what's 500 feet away from every church, daycare, school, playground, which kind of disqualifies most of the city. But we can look into it and see if there is any place that we could. I personally am again ambivalent about the whole cannabis thing, but it is law, and so we have to figure out how to deal with it. So that was last week. We had a presentation at the Planning Commission for the Mountain Brook Farms development. That was one of the best, well-considered and well-thought-out presentations for a development that I've ever seen. Not that I've seen a lot of them, but I've done a lot of development work, so and it was, I was very happy with what they came up with. They're looking at nearly 50% open space, making as solid use of the community village zoning process, and are willing to make provisions for the extension of Antrim Boulevard. So, and they're willing to include that in the development, which is fabulous. So, hoping to see some more information about that, hoping we resolve enough of our issues that we can clear that many that many uses to be able to see this through to implementation. I think it'll be good for the city. Recovery 180 came in and presented a site plan that was very well done, very well received. Trying to think if there's anything else that I missed here as I'm looking for my paperwork on it. I think those were the real highlights. So it was a good month.
Councilmember Cheney.
Okay, first up, I have the police department statistical report. There were 395 dispatched calls for service. There were 25 citations issued, 67 warnings issued, 12 adult arrests, and 3 juvenile arrests. As far as community outreach in July, the police department participated in the fireworks event for the 4th of July celebration. The event was a huge success, and the officers took advantage of the interaction with the citizens and visitors of Taneytown. As far as training and education goes, all officers were trained in CPR for professional rescuers and first aid for severe trauma, and that was done through the Red Cross. PFC Marshall completed field training and has been released for solo patrol. And from July 18th to 24th, PFC Betcher completed active shooter threat training, which was done by the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. That's all I've got.
Councilmember McCarron.
First, I want to compliment whoever is responsible for the recent flora that has appeared downtown. It's lovely. There's vines and flowers on every street corner and even spreading down either side of the square. So I think that's a remarkable event. Additionally, I want to say I got a email from Paul Cluth, who is the cherry tree guy, I think. And he was kind of disturbed about the continuing vacancies that appear on Main Street, and I agreed with him. And had the opportunity to talk with our economic development director, and he acknowledged that that was a problem and didn't have any direct solution, but nevertheless, we did accomplish a feat this past month that we've been trying to get done for some time, and that's establish a new Main Street meeting schedule, and that is to occur at the end of this month. So we're excited about that and the fact that that committee is going to get back in motion again, and hopefully that will have some direct impact on what's going on downtown. I had some other conversations on matters. It's, you know, it's just a slow process. We all want to see things happen tomorrow, and nothing happens overnight. It all just takes time and patience. And I think we've got effort behind the desire to renovate our business, town business, not only downtown, but citywide. So I'm continuing to communicate with Mish on a bi-weekly basis, if not more often, and it seems to, he seems to be focusing on what the problems happen to be. So soon we will see results, I hope. One other thing I want to mention is that my neighbor had a situation with a tenant that was unfortunate this past month, and she's housebound, and they're both elderly, her and her husband, and situation escalated to the point where for a period of time her husband was not allowed in the house, and this seemed to be very unjust. I found out about it secondhand. But the comment that I wanted to make is how much praise and support she's given our police department and how wonderfully they handled the whole situation. She couldn't say enough about the officers that helped her and her husband through this difficult period of about 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks, I guess. Things seem to be rectified. The abusive tenant is gone and things are back to normal. But I just wanted to congratulate the police department publicly for the extra effort they made in smoothing over a situation that could have been a lot worse. So that's all I had to say.
Okay, first I'd like to report that, I'm happy to report that Public Works was able to get 2 new hires. They always can use all the help they can get. I was appointed to the MML Legislative Committee. We're in the process of reviewing 25 proposals to whittle down to 2.
Good job.
For them to work on. So we're in the process of going through that. And the mayor wrote a letter for Habitat for Humanity of support for a Maryland grant for funding. They were very appreciative of that, and they look forward to possibly another Taneytown build, not before next year. They aren't undertaking anything else the rest of this year.
There was some action going on out there today.
Yeah, but they are looking forward to possibly another Taneytown build.
Councilmember Foley.
Okay, the FSK FFA Alumni Association Car, Truck, Tractor, and Motorcycle Show was on Saturday, July 15th, and it was a resounding success. Memorial Park was packed. The Alumni Association reported that it was their best turnout yet, and they've already booked the park for next July. Family Fun Food Truck Friday event on July 21st was enjoyed by all who attended, and it was great to see all of the families who came out that evening. The following day was the first annual Artisan Fest, and the Carroll County Arts Council was very happy with everything about the event. the park, the turnout, and the partnership with the city. They've already booked the park for next July, and we're looking forward to this event growing throughout the years. The youth summer tennis clinics and the Hapkido programs went very well, and registrations are still coming in for next month's adult tennis clinic. The free family movie nights at Memorial Park have concluded. This past Saturday was the last showing. Thank you to the Taneytown Men of Faith and the Carroll County Arts Council for putting these on for our community. Yoga in the park has been extremely popular this summer with participants of all ages. The last session was supposed to be next Monday, but because of the storms for tonight, they postponed it, so it will be the 28th, so they will do the next two. Reading in the Park contest was held last week, and we wanted to congratulate Jordan Redding for winning first prize with 30 pictures posted of his family members reading in the parks. Catherine Andrews Highest for winning second prize, and Denise Hayden Sampson was third prize. The prizes included gift cards from local businesses, children's books, games, and toys. Thank you to all the participants, and we hope you continue to enjoy visiting and reading in our lovely parks. A couple of events coming up next month. At Memorial Park, we have our fall flea market on Saturday, September 23rd. It'll be from 9 to 2. And then Sunday, September 30th is our Harvest Festival. That'll be from 11 to 3. Hope to see everybody out there. Bonneville Park construction is rolling along, and the preliminary site plans for Memorial Park expansion have been submitted to the county for review. And that's it.
Sounds good for anybody still watching through the long night. I appreciate you guys watching through it all, and I appreciate council members for sticking it out. We had a lot to go over tonight. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great rest of the night. We are looking for a motion of adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you. 2 o'clock tomorrow. Did the stream?